I've been on a bit of a tear here lately, yammering on and on and on about why I think beauty is so important to our culture and why I think you should care. And then this last week comes along and perfectly illustrates everything I've been trying to say. So, friends, Romans, Americans, lend me your ears, because I do not come to condemn beauty. Nay, I have come to praise beauty.
Architectural Artcast.
Late 19th century, early 20th century, there was one thing that was consistent throughout most architecture: beauty. Now, this applies to all of Western architecture, but for purposes of this video, I'm going to focus on American beauty. A great example are skyscrapers. Empire State, Flatiron, it doesn't matter. Chicago, New York, the thing that they all had in common: beauty. More importantly, they had self-confidence. They exuded pride. They squared their shoulders against the skyline, stuck their chests out, and demanded you pay attention to them. They inspired awe and respect. Now let's look at the skyscrapers of the last 40, 50 years. Bland, generic glass boxes. There's no proud self-confidence, boldly putting their shoulders against the skyline, demanding you pay attention. To the contrary, they're meant to reflect the sky, reflect the environment, to be invisible. The building is saying, I'm not really here. Just ignore me. Don't pay any attention while I whimper over in the corner. It's as if the architect is ashamed of their building. Invisibility isn't just a problem with skyscrapers, it's throughout architecture. And this reveals the deeper problem: the conscious, intentional rejection of beauty. Neutral, by definition, can't be beautiful. Neutral is mundane and average. Beautiful is unique, special. You can't have something be neutral and beautiful at the same time. They're diametrically opposed ideas. Y'all don't think the public's not aware of what's going on? Name me one architect that in the last 20 years has become a household name. Name me one architect whose work has entered the cultural zeitgeist. Name me one architect whose work has had a profound impact on the profession. I have an idea. Just name me one architect in the last 20 years who has had more than 15 minutes of fame. Just name one. You can't. Y'all want to know why you can't give me names? First off, architecture schools don't teach beauty anymore. But it's worse than that. They actively drive out anybody who might have the talent to become a transformative figure, to become a household name. And they drive out anybody who has an interest in creating beautiful architecture. This little old hostility to beauty ain't confined to architecture. It's a parasite that has stuck its tentacles into all aspects of American culture. Years ago, I took a tour of a fromagerie where they were still making French cheese, camembert, yummy, with traditional methods. At the end of the tour, the farmer, his wife, and their 2 adult daughters took my group to the tasting room, where they served us wine and a wide selection of yummy cheeses. I was standing over in the corner, stuffing my face. You think I was going to miss out on this opportunity? When the farmer comes over and strikes up a conversation. And at some point, he turns to me and says, "You realize how lucky you are?" My response was, "Yeah, I'm lucky. This cheese is really good." And he's like, "No, do you realize how lucky you are?" Realizing he was being serious, I looked up at him like, And he says, "You're so lucky to be surrounded by all these beautiful women." I looked around and realized we were the only 2 men in the room. I was the only guy with my group, and on the farm, it was the farmer's wife and his 2 daughters. To make things even more awkward, everybody in the room had stopped and were listening to our conversation. The farmer continued and said, "You are so lucky to be surrounded by all these beautiful American women." Trying to be polite, I said, "You have a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful daughters. You're lucky." And clearly the whole family were very pleased at my words, but the farmer put up his hand and he said, "No, American women are different. They're special and unique. Their beauty is the class of the world." I'm lucky enough to know people from all over the world. I wish I had $1 for every time I had a variation on this conversation. I've had more than one woman say to me with pride, "I'm an example of how beautiful women are from my country, culture, whatever. But American women are different. They're more beautiful." And whenever I'd say, "Can you give me some examples?" they would always have a name, a woman whose beauty they aspired to. I have a friend whose idol is Grace Kelly. No, she's not that old, although it is interesting what people gravitate towards. Once you know that my friend's idol is Grace Kelly, everything makes sense. First off, my friend has a similar body shape as Grace, similar facial structure. Now, my friend is not of the same culture as Grace, trust me. My friend doesn't try to be a clone of Grace, wear the same clothes, hairstyle, whatever, but what she does do is go for the same feminine, elegant sophistication. And she pulls that off in spades. This perception that American women are the most beautiful in all the world didn't come about by accident. It was intentionally created through generations. Before we go any further, I need to do a real quick review. Don't worry, it won't be on the test, but I need to do a real quick review on what is beauty, more specifically, feminine beauty. I have videos where I explain this whole topic in depth. At some point, I need to figure out how to do the little linky thing. One of the videos is titled Beauty as Rebellion. Check it out if you want more information. There are 4 elements to beauty. The first element, the baseline, is your physical appearance. There is a mathematical ideal, and the closer you align to that mathematical ideal, the larger percentage of people will find you physically attractive. Once we have the baseline, your physical appearance, the next thing is the it factor. Charisma, we don't know what it is, but what we do know, if you have it, people will evaluate your attractiveness higher. The more it you have, the higher your attractiveness. Third, and arguably the most important, likability. The more people like you, the more they will find you attractive. And the inverse is just as true. The more people dislike you, the more unattractive they will find you. Last but not least, personal preference. What any particular individual likes will determine if they find any other particular individual attractive. One last thing about beauty. It's a marker of good health and good genetics. 2 important things in selecting a mate, because a person who has good health and good genetics are most likely to produce children who have good health and good genetics, things that are very important to the survival of the species. Back to American women. Americans as a whole have had the perception that they're a good-looking people going all the way back to the 19th century. There's an element of truth to this perception. There's historic reasons for it. Y'all have heard the idea of brain drain, America absorbing all the smartest people from around the world, being a problem for the countries they came from. Well, America has also benefited from genetic drain. Starting with the earliest colonies, British settlers would have to travel thousands of miles under brutal conditions just so they could get to North America in time for winter, hoping they would survive long enough for spring so they could plant crops, hoping they'd raise enough food to survive the next winter. Death tolls were atrocious. Brutal but efficient culling of genes. Before the 20th century, with all the difficulties of immigrating into the United States, to one degree or another, this process was repeated over and over again. And with Western expansion, this process again was repeated. Brutal but efficient genetic culling. Once people, the survivors, got here and got settled, most Americans, all the way up to World War II, lived rural agrarian lifestyles. Clean air, clean water, lots of exercise, healthy food, which means more and more Americans were producing healthy children with good genetics. And statistically speaking, Healthy people with good genetics produce a lot more beautiful people. The reality is that people want beauty. One of the first times that the world started to realize the power of the perception that Americans are unusually attractive people was World War I. Suddenly, a large amount of single, lonely American men were in England and France. And British and French women went for them in a big way. Attractive people can afford to be picky. Attractive people attract other attractive people. England and France already had major cultural genetic problems, with the loss of an entire generation of young men thanks to trench warfare. And then, at the very last moment, a bunch of American men come swooping in and skim the cream right off the top. They take back with them to America as war brides some of the healthiest, most beautiful women with the best genetics. In the 1920s and 30s, as Hollywood gained in power and influence, they took this already existing idea that Americans were particularly attractive and ran with it. Hollywood's formula was very straightforward. Find actors and actresses who came as close to the mathematical ideal as possible, wrap them in the old Tinseltown mystique, give them the glamour treatment, hair, makeup, clothing, and then present them to the world as examples of America's finest. Hollywood didn't have to limit themselves to searching small-town America for talent. By the very nature of what America is, Hollywood could scour the entire world for the next big star. What? You say you're not an American? No problem. Just become an American citizen. Or we'll say you are. What? You have a foreign, funny-sounding name? No problem. We'll change it to something that sounds all American. I mean, a kid from Oklahoma named Marion Morrissey became John Wayne after all. You say you have a heavy accent? Don't worry, we can work on that. We'll teach you to speak with a mid-Atlantic accent. It'll make you sound sophisticated and cultured. But also that accent sounds like it comes from everywhere and nowhere. It will add to your mystique. Again, America's skimming the cream right off the top, this time around from the entire world. Beautiful people with good genetics and good health are voluntarily flocking to America because they want to be in pictures. America, again, is benefiting from genetic drain. However, Hollywood was trying to do more than just define American beauty. They were trying to define American masculinity and American femininity. What is oftentimes lost amongst all the cries of patriarchy is that America as a concept, America as a culture, America as a country are seen to be feminine. That's why symbolically these ideas are always portrayed as being a woman. America as a culture has always viewed feminine beauty to be the peak, the ultimate expression of human beauty, far superior to masculine beauty, and that attitude was reflected in Hollywood. More often than not, it was the female star that determined if a film was a success or failure. And despite what all the revisionist history here lately tries to claim, if the woman was more than a pretty face, she could amass a great deal of power in Hollywood. Just one example, Katharine Hepburn. She started her own production company, and apparently she was really good at spotting scripts that would become hit movies. Katharine Hepburn's influence went well beyond Hollywood. She changed American fashion forever. She's the one who popularized women wearing pants. No Katharine Hepburn, no Daisy Dukes. Just saying. American women's influence on American culture was noticed by her enemies. Most Americans know the story of Admiral Yamamoto of the Imperial Japanese Navy and how he tried to warn his government, no, don't mess with America. Just leave them alone. What's often left out of the story? Why he felt the need to make that warning. The Japanese government, the German government, the Russian government, and to a certain degree, Great Britain and France thought America was weak because they thought America was ruled by their women. They thought American men were weak and effeminate. They thought it would be easy to defeat America because their manly men would wipe out America's armies made up of girly men. Where did they get this idea? Well, one, they were watching movies like everybody else. They were seeing how Hollywood was defining American femininity. America's enemies were so busy looking at the beautiful women and how they were being portrayed, they forgot to notice that Hollywood was defining American masculinity as well. Turns out, you can have a culture that celebrates strong women and at the same time celebrates strong men. Oops. After the war, America was feeling its oats. All through the 50s and into the 60s, American feminine beauty was on full display. Although a fair argument could be made that some were starting to take it a bit too far. Late 60s into the 70s sees the rise of postmodernism. Suddenly, beauty's out the door. It's verboten. To quote a recent loudmouth, celebrities, movie stars aren't meant to be easy on the eyes. You're not supposed to enjoy looking at them. Hollywood was still in the business of putting butts in seats, and they still knew the formula. If you're going to ignore the baseline, appearance, you better find people who have it through the roof and they're likable. Better yet, cool. This is the era of Jack Nicholson, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino. All talented as heck, but they ain't very good looking. Hey, Randy, you want to give us some feminine examples? Or are you chicken? Okay. Shirley MacLaine, Barbara Streisand, Cher. This postmodern BS garbage. Hey, Randy, why don't you tell us what you really think? If y'all hadn't noticed, that's kind of what I do around here. But at any rate, this postmodern BS garbage went everywhere. The idea was, beauty? That's for the peasants, the unwashed masses, the plebs. Only the cultured and sophisticated with the right education are capable of understanding real art. Yeah, and you can bite me too. 80s and 90s saw the rejection of postmodernism. The celebration of American feminine beauty as the class of the world was in full swing. Simply put, boobs were back on the menu, boys. No, I didn't mean it that way. About 10 years ago, plus or minus, Hollywood, in collusion with every major social institution, decided that they were not only going to redefine American feminine beauty, they were going to redefine femininity itself. And again, the idea that's behind the drive to redefine American femininity is the active rejection of beauty, the active hatred and resentment of beauty. It's the active hatred of femininity itself. For the last 10 years, this new femininity was pushed on everyone. Anybody who raised an objection were slapped down, made to shut up one way or another. The first problem? You're going against your very institution's previous message. For over 100 years, American culture was told over and over and over again that its women were the most beautiful in all the world and that we should be celebrating their femininity. Suddenly, in the last few years, y'all come along and say, no, ignore all that stuff. We're going to tell you how you should really think now. Is that what you're going to stick with? I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. American women like being told they're beautiful. I would rather steal honey from bears than be the one that has to try to convince American women, no, you're really not that beautiful. In fact, if you want to be beautiful, that makes you a bad person. Good luck. Second, people often talk about how this nonsense goes against human nature. No, it goes against biology itself. It goes against the genetic drive to reproduce, the genetic drive to find the best genes to reproduce with, which a marker of is beauty. Third, Hollywood done screwed up. They may have found alternate sources of income to finance this garbage, but they still need butts and seats. They need butts and seats to expose people to these ideas. No butts and seats, no convincing anybody. If your goal is to push, let's call it an alternate aesthetic, there is a formula, one that Hollywood used to know. If you're going to try to promote actors who have appearances that most people would find, shall we say, suboptimal, they better have it factor through the roof and be as likable as all get out. Well, like I said, Hollywood done screwed up. Every now and then, people go and do something that, despite their best efforts, reveals a greater truth. This video is from a YouTube channel called Jubilee. And yes, if you know what you're doing, you can manipulate all this. But as I said, sometimes despite the best efforts, you end up revealing a greater truth. 5 men are asked to come to an agreement in ranking the attractiveness of 5 women. Pay attention to the lady in the middle and the one at the far end. The men are then allowed to ask the women a series of questions. And at the end, they re-rank them based upon how much they like them. Guess what? The 2 rankings are very different. Something we already know, right? Well, think about this for a minute. These young men, for most of their lives, have been exposed to ideas like toxic masculinity, the male gaze, female oppression, patriarchy, unrealistic beauty standards. And yet, when asked, they can come to an agreement within minutes on which women they find most attractive and which women they like the most. It's almost like it's wired into us. The previous video was the setup for this video, which is from the same channel, Jubilee. This video also has 5 guys being asked to come to an agreement on the beauty of 5 different women. Rank them. And again, they do it very quickly with very little problem. The twist, this time around, the women were asked to come to an agreement on their own beauty first. As you all can see, there's quite a difference. Notice, the woman that the men found the most attractive, the women ranked her last. And the woman that was second most attractive, she was ranked second to last. What's going on? Do women have no clue when it comes to figuring out what men find attractive? No. I highly recommend y'all watch the section of the video where the women sort themselves out with the sound off. Ignore everything they say and just watch the body language. You will quickly see that the 3 women who are at the bottom of the scale quickly cut out and ignore the opinions of the 2 most attractive women. The 3 less attractive women impose their viewpoint on the entire group. Everybody involved knew the real ranking, and everybody involved knew exactly what was going on here. Going back to something I keep saying over and over again, academic and corporate feminism, yes, I'm being redundant, is founded upon the hatred of women, the hatred of femininity. If you try to go against biology itself, if you try to go against 100 years of a culture being told that its women are beautiful and that we should celebrate that beauty, you're going to get rebellion from those women. Case in point, Sydney Sweeney coming out and saying all this supposed women empowering women is so much BS. Sydney says it's all smoke and mirrors. The real agenda? Destroying women. The article reminds us of the producer who felt for some reason the need to come out and tell the public, Sydney Sweeney, I don't get her. She can't act and she's not pretty. Acting's an art. It's subjective. If the producer, whose job it is to evaluate actors' talent, had stopped there, maybe her opinions would have carried some weight. The producer just couldn't keep her mouth shut though. She had to keep the yap going. She had to add, she's not pretty. Pretty isn't subjective. In fact, a large percentage of the public has become very vocal in their admiration of Sydney Sweeney's appearance. So why would this producer go and say something that could be so easily disproved? Oh, gotcha. Last week, we had an election where Donald J. Trump won in a landslide. And the same people who've been pushing this alternate aesthetic, this new femininity, the same people shouting patriarchy, toxic masculinity, male gaze, unrealistic beauty standards, went mental They shaved their heads. They announced they're going to make themselves unattractive to men as possible, refusing to have sex until they get their way. Wow, ladies, talk about giving away the game. You're admitting that unattractive women are not appealing to men. The goal of this new aesthetic the entire time was to convince women to make themselves unattractive so they wouldn't be appealing to men. It is explicitly anti-beauty. Unfortunately for those ladies, the cat was already out of the bag a long time ago. Here's something that should be frightening to those ladies and everybody else pushing this alternate aesthetic. Last week's election, 18 to 24-year-olds voted for Trump by 52%. 40% of 18 to 24-year-old women voted for Trump. And before anybody starts to say anything, this cuts across all ethnicities. There have been warning signs that this backlash had been building for a while. Just look at the success of Barbie, a movie that allowed women to celebrate being beautiful and feminine. This last week, if you go on X, Twitter, any social media platform for that matter, you see beautiful women openly mocking and ridiculing the head shavers. You see them openly celebrating their beauty and their femininity. They've already lost the next generation. I want to conclude by saying, if nominated to lead the Federal Bureau of Beauty and Aesthetics, it would be my honor to serve this country. What? Hey, I'm just as qualified as anybody else. Huh? There's no bureau? Oh, I guess that's probably for the better. At any rate, I hope I've given you all something to think about. And until next time, y'all be safe. If y'all are still here, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. While you're at it, why don't you like this video, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell. You can hear me yammer on about something else next time. And feel free to share this video far and wide.
Please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment.